In 1992, a surgeon in Sarajevo performed an emergency appendectomy by candlelight with no anesthesia. Using kitchen knives he'd sterilized over a fire. The patient was his own daughter. 3 years earlier, he'd been one of the most respected professionals in Yugoslavia. He had a beautiful home, a luxury car, a thriving practice, money in the bank. When the war started, all of that became worthless overnight. But his hands, his knowledge, his ability to save a life with whatever tools he could find, that became priceless. Right now, as you watch this, you're surrounded by miracles you don't even notice. You flip a switch, light appears. You turn a tap, clean water flows. You open your refrigerator, it's cold. You check your phone. The world's information is at your fingertips. You go to the store. The shelves are stocked with food from 50 different countries. But here's what most people never stop to think about. Every single one of those miracles depends on a system. A vast, interconnected, incredibly complex system. A system of power grids and supply chains, of global logistics and just-in-time delivery, of specialized workers performing specialized tasks in a machine so large none of us can see all of it. And we have placed all of our faith, all of our survival into that system. We've become what I call abstraction dependent. Your wealth? It's numbers on a screen. Your job? It's a specialized role that only exists because 10,000 other specialized roles exist. Your food? It travels an average of 1,500 miles before it reaches your plate. Your skills? Most of them are designed for a world that assumes the lights stay on. We are more prosperous, more comfortable, and more connected than any generation in human history. We are also more vulnerable. And in every single case, the people who suffered most weren't the poor. The poor already knew how to survive. It was the middle class, the educated, the people who'd done everything right, who'd saved money, who'd built careers, who'd trusted the system. Because when the system broke, their entire lives, their wealth, their status, their sense of identity, broke with it. In any crisis, society immediately reverts to what psychologist Abraham Maslow called the hierarchy of needs. And at the very bottom, the foundation of everything, are physiological needs. Food, water, warmth, shelter. In the modern world, we don't produce these things, we purchase them. But when the system breaks, when money becomes worthless, the person who can create these essentials becomes the most powerful person in the community. This is the domain of the producer. Let's start with the most obvious: food. Right now in the United States, less than 2% of the population works in agriculture. Less than 2%. The rest of us, 98% of us, are completely dependent on a supply chain that stretches thousands of miles. Your tomatoes come from Mexico, your coffee from Colombia, your rice from Thailand. This food travels by truck, by train, by cargo ship. It requires fuel, functioning roads, operating ports, and most importantly, a working financial system to coordinate it all. What happens when that breaks? Let me tell you about the Great Depression. In 1932, at the depth of the crisis, 1 in 4 Americans was unemployed. In cities, people were starving, literally starving, while in rural areas, farmers were burning crops because prices had collapsed and they couldn't afford to harvest them. The system had broken. Food existed, but the mechanism to distribute it had failed. The response was remarkable. The government launched the Victory Garden movement, encouraging every American to grow their own food. And they did. By 1944, 20 million American households had planted gardens. These small plots produced 40% of all vegetables consumed in the United States. Think about that. 40%. From backyards and balconies and empty lots. But this isn't just about planting seeds in the ground. Real food production is a skill, a deep skill with layers of knowledge that take years to master. You need to understand soil health, how to build living soil through composting, how to add nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium naturally, how to create the ecosystem that allows plants to thrive. You need to understand crop rotation, why you can't plant the same thing in the same place year after year, how to plant a garden that maintains the fertility of the earth. You need to understand seed saving, perhaps the most critical skill of all. In the modern world, we buy new seeds every year. But our grandparents saved seeds. They selected the best plants, dried their seeds, and stored them for next year. This is how humanity fed itself for 10,000 years. It's how you ensure food security not just for one season, but for generations. And then there's preservation. Growing food is one thing. Keeping it is another. Our ancestors knew how to can, ferment, dry, and cure food to last through winter. These are arts we've almost completely forgotten. This category also includes small-scale animal husbandry. A flock of 6 chickens can provide you with 5 eggs a day, nearly 2,000 eggs a year. That's protein security. A couple of goats can provide milk, which can be turned into cheese. Rabbits, ducks, quail. These are small-scale livestock that can be raised in surprisingly little space and provide remarkable nutritional value. During the Siege of Sarajevo, which we'll talk about more later, the people who survived best weren't the ones with the biggest stockpiles. Stockpiles run out. It was the people who could produce, who kept rabbits in their apartments, who grew vegetables on their balconies, who turned their city parks into gardens. The skill of food production is the foundation of all human civilization. When everything else fails, it's the one skill that literally keeps you alive. You can live for 3 weeks without food. You can live for 3 days without water. Right now, you take water for granted. You turn a tap and it flows. Clean, safe, unlimited. But that water comes from somewhere. It's collected in reservoirs, treated in plants, and delivered through hundreds of miles of underground pipes. It requires pumps, which require electricity, which requires a functioning grid. It's a chain of dependencies, and like any chain, it breaks at the weakest link. Sarajevo, 1992. The city's water supply was cut off. For nearly 4 years, the only source of fresh water was the Miljacka River, which ran through the city. But reaching it meant crossing open ground, exposed to sniper fire. Every day, citizens would wait for cover of darkness or fog, then sprint to the river with whatever containers they could carry. Hundreds of people died just trying to get water. Those who survived did so because they learned skills that most modern people have never even thought about. They learned how to collect rainwater, using tarps and gutters to channel every drop into storage containers. They learned how to build improvised filters from sand, gravel, and charcoal, the same basic technology humans have used for thousands of years. They learned how to purify water through boiling, or with bleach, or with iodine tablets. They learned how to ration it, how to prioritize its use. Drinking first, cooking second, washing last. These aren't complicated skills, but they're life-saving skills. And in a collapse, the person who understands water, where to find it, how to purify it, how to store it, becomes a community hero. Here's what's remarkable. The basic technology to make water safe hasn't changed in centuries. A simple ceramic filter, a pot to boil water, a tarp to catch rain. These are Stone Age solutions that work just as well today. You don't need advanced technology, you need knowledge. In 2003, the northeastern United States experienced a massive blackout. 50 million people lost power. It lasted less than 2 days, and in that brief window, civilization started to crack. ATMs stopped working, gas stations couldn't pump fuel, refrigerators failed, cell towers went dark, water pumps stopped, people were trapped in elevators, hospitals ran on backup generators. Less than 2 days. That's how long we can go before the modern world starts to collapse. Now imagine that power doesn't come back on. Not in 2 days, not in 2 weeks. Maybe not for months. Energy is the invisible foundation of everything we do. Cooking, heating, lighting, communication, food preservation, water purification, everything. When the grid fails, the person who can create power becomes a king. At the most basic level, this means understanding fire. And I don't mean lighting a match, I mean real firecraft. How to safely fell a tree. How to split and season firewood so it burns efficiently. How to build a fire that provides maximum heat with minimum smoke. How to create a rocket stove, a simple design that can cook a meal with just a handful of sticks. This is low tech, but it's reliable tech. It works. It's worked for millennia. But there's also a modern layer to this, off-grid electrical systems. A small solar panel array and a battery bank can power LED lights, charge devices, run a radio, and even operate a small refrigerator. That's not just comfort, That's strategic advantage. You have light when everyone else is in darkness. You have communication when everyone else is isolated. You have information when everyone else is blind. After Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico in 2017, the power grid was destroyed. It took 11 months to restore electricity to the entire island. 11 months. But scattered across the island were individuals who'd installed small solar systems. Their homes became community hubs, places where people could charge phones, get information, and feel connected to the outside world. The producer, the grower of food, the purifier of water, the creator of energy, are the bedrock of any functioning society. Without them, nothing else matters. But once basic needs are met, a new challenge emerges, keeping everything from falling apart. Here's a truth about collapse. Nothing new gets made. When a system breaks down, manufacturing stops, supply chains freeze, factories close, the flow of new goods, new cars, new tools, new parts, new anything, dries up completely. What you have is all you'll have, and everything you have is slowly, inevitably breaking down. This is where the fixer becomes indispensable. These are the people who can repair what's broken and maintain what still works. They're the guardians of civilization's hardware, the thin line between a functioning community and a pile of useless junk. Let me tell you about Cuba. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. For Cuba, this was catastrophic. The Soviets had been their main trading partner, providing oil, food, and yes, cars and car parts. Overnight, that supply line vanished. Cuba had thousands of vehicles, mostly classic American cars from the 1950s, before the U.S. embargo. And suddenly, there were no replacement parts, no new cars, no imports. A lesser society would have simply stopped moving. But Cubans are nothing if not resourceful. A generation of mechanics, known as Los Mecanicos, became the backbone of the nation. They kept 1950s Chevrolets and Fords running using salvaged parts from completely different vehicles. They fabricated engine components by hand. They rebuilt carburetors using pieces from Soviet-era Ladas. They created their own gaskets from old rubber. They engineered solutions that Detroit would never have imagined. These weren't just mechanics. They were mechanical artists, and their skill kept an entire nation mobile. In any collapse, transportation is critical. It's how you move goods, how you evacuate, how you access resources beyond your immediate area. But modern vehicles are complex machines, computers on wheels. When they break, most people are helpless. The fixer isn't. They understand engines, how combustion works, how fuel systems operate, how electrical systems function. They can diagnose problems by sound and feel. They can repair a cracked engine block, rewire an ignition system, or rebuild a transmission with basic tools. But it goes deeper than cars. It's generators, water pumps, chainsaws. Any machine with an engine becomes precious in a collapse, and the person who can keep them running is worth their weight in gold. During World War II, Britain faced a similar crisis. German U-boats were sinking supply ships faster than they could be replaced. New equipment became scarce. The British response was to create repair battalions, teams of mechanics whose entire job was to salvage and repair damaged equipment. They kept the military supplied not with new tanks and trucks, but by fixing the old ones over and over again. The mechanic doesn't just fix machines. They keep society mobile. They keep it productive. They keep it alive. After World War II, Germany was a landscape of ruins. 80% of Berlin had been destroyed. Hamburg, Dresden, Cologne, city after city reduced to rubble. There was no construction industry, no building supplies, no hardware stores, just mountains of shattered brick and twisted metal. And yet Germany rebuilt. How? In many cases, it was the Trümmerfrauen, the rubble women. Tens of thousands of women who, with their bare hands, salvaged bricks from destroyed buildings. They cleaned each brick, sorted them, stacked them, and from this salvaged material, a new Germany was built. Your primary physical asset in any crisis is your shelter. It's your protection from the elements, your security, your home base, and it's constantly degrading. A roof leaks, a door breaks, a window cracks. In the modern world, you call someone. In a collapsed world, you are that someone. The builder and carpenter can repair and maintain shelter with whatever materials are available. They can patch a roof with salvaged tin, reinforce a door with scrap wood, build a simple, sturdy structure from almost nothing. But this skill extends far beyond buildings. It's furniture, storage, beds, tables, shelves, all the physical infrastructure of daily life. In the Great Depression, skilled carpenters who'd lost their jobs would travel from town to town, trading their labor for food and shelter. A family that could offer a carpenter 3 meals and a place to sleep for a week would get a new barn, a repaired porch, or a winter's supply of firewood. The carpenter's skill was their currency. And let's not forget the smaller crafts, the seamstress and the leather worker. In a world without fast fashion, clothing becomes precious. A good coat, a sturdy pair of boots. These are investments that need to last for years, maybe decades. The ability to sew, to patch, to mend clothing extends its life. The ability to repair a boot, to replace a sole, to restitch a seam keeps your feet protected. During the Great Depression, these skills were commonplace. Every household had someone who could sew. Today, most people don't even own a sewing kit. But I guarantee you, in a collapse, the person who can repair clothing and footwear will never lack for trade. Modern life depends on 2 invisible systems, electricity and plumbing. We don't think about them until they stop working. And when they stop working, most people are completely helpless. The electrician and the plumber are the masters of these hidden systems. They understand what most people never see, the wiring in the walls, the pipes underground, the flow of power and water that makes modern life possible. In a collapse scenario, these skills become modern magic. The electrician can wire a small solar panel system to provide power. They can repair a backup generator. They can troubleshoot why the well pump stopped working. They can do all of this safely, which is critical, because electricity can kill you if you don't know what you're doing. After Hurricane Katrina, when New Orleans was dark and flooded, it wasn't the government that restored power to many neighborhoods. It was local electricians working block by block, jury-rigging solutions to get lights back on. The plumber can repair a broken water line, install a hand pump on a well, fix a leaking pipe before water damage destroys a building, create a gravity-fed water system when there's no electricity for pumps. In the Siege of Sarajevo, plumbers became heroes. They repaired the city's damaged water infrastructure under fire. They built improvised systems to get water to apartment buildings. They kept the city's residents alive. Here's what makes these skills so valuable. They require both theoretical knowledge and practical experience. You can't just read a book and become an electrician. You need to have worked with these systems. You need the hands-on understanding that only comes from actually doing the work. The fixer doesn't create new resources. They maximize existing ones. They turn broken things into working things. They stretch the lifespan of everything the community has. In a world of scarcity, that ability is priceless. In any crisis, the most fragile system is the human body. It's vulnerable to injury, to infection, to disease. And when hospitals are overwhelmed, when pharmacies are empty, when the medical supply chain collapses, the skills of the healer become the difference between life and death. This is a domain that extends far beyond doctors and nurses, though their expertise would be almost priceless. It begins with knowledge that everyone should have, and extends to skills that can save entire communities. August 29, 2005. Hurricane Katrina slams into the Gulf Coast. Within hours, New Orleans is underwater. The city's hospitals are evacuating. Ambulances can't get through. 911 doesn't work, and people are injured. Everywhere. The formal medical system had collapsed. In its place, something remarkable happened. Informal street clinics emerged. Often just a person with medical training and a first aid kit, set up under a highway overpass or in a parking lot. Many were run by nurses, some by paramedics, others by community members who just had advanced first aid training. They became the front line of public health. They cleaned wounds, treated dehydration, stabilized injuries, saved lives. In any collapse scenario, trauma is common. People are working harder, using tools they're not familiar with, working in dangerous conditions. There are fires, accidents, falls, cuts. And here's the terrifying part. In a post-collapse world, a minor injury can become a death sentence. A small cut gets infected. Without antibiotics, that infection spreads. Sepsis sets in. In the modern world, You'd go to a hospital and get a shot of penicillin. Problem solved. In a collapsed world, you die. This is why wound care is perhaps the single most important medical skill. Knowing how to properly clean a wound, how to remove debris, how to recognize the signs of infection early, how to dress it properly to promote healing and prevent contamination. It sounds simple. It's not. It requires knowledge, practice, and the right supplies. Beyond wound care, there's a whole spectrum of emergency medicine. How to control severe bleeding using pressure points and tourniquets. How to treat shock, a condition that kills more people in emergencies than the injuries themselves. How to recognize and treat dehydration, which can be lethal in just days. How to set a simple fracture using improvised splints. How to treat burns, which are incredibly common when people are cooking over open flames. These aren't doctor-level skills. These are things a motivated person can learn. There are courses, books, training. But most people never bother because they assume the medical system will always be there. History says otherwise. In the Soviet Union's collapse, medical care essentially evaporated. Hospitals ran out of basic supplies. Doctors worked without pay. People died from treatable conditions. The survivors were often those who had basic medical knowledge themselves, or who knew someone who did. Here's a fact that surprises most people. In most historical collapses, more people die from disease than from violence. During the American Civil War, for every soldier killed in battle, 2 died from disease. In World War I, the Spanish flu pandemic killed more people than the war itself. The great killers are dysentery, cholera, typhoid, all diseases that spread through contaminated water and poor sanitation. When the sewage system stops working, when there's no running water, when garbage isn't being collected, disease spreads like wildfire. This is the silent killer that can wipe out a community faster than any external threat. The skill of sanitation is life-saving, not just for you, but for everyone around you. This means knowing how to properly dispose of human waste, how to dig a latrine at the correct depth and distance from water sources, how to manage compost safely, how to prevent flies and rodents from spreading disease. It means understanding hygiene, how to wash hands effectively without running water, how to purify dishes and cooking utensils, how to keep a living space clean to prevent the spread of illness. After the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, cholera broke out. Haiti hadn't seen cholera in over a century, but when the sanitation system collapsed, the disease came roaring back. It killed nearly 10,000 people. The communities that survived best were those where someone understood basic sanitation, where someone organized waste disposal, where someone educated people on hand washing and food safety. These are unglamorous skills. Nobody fantasizes about being the sanitation expert, but in a collapse, this person is a community hero because they prevent the invisible killer. Finally, there's the skill of understanding basic medicine, both modern and ancient. On the modern side, this means knowing the proper use and dosage of a small stockpile of essential medicines, how to use antibiotics correctly, when to use pain relievers, how to treat common ailments with the limited supplies you might have. But it also means rediscovering knowledge our ancestors took for granted, herbal medicine. For thousands of years, before pharmaceutical companies, humans treated illness with plants. Willow bark contains salicin, which becomes salicylic acid, aspirin. Yarrow is a natural coagulant that stops bleeding. Garlic is a powerful antibiotic. Chamomile reduces inflammation. Elderberry boosts the immune system. This isn't about replacing modern medicine. Modern medicine is a miracle, and when it's available, use it. But when it's not available, having an alternative can save your life. During World War II, Russian doctors ran out of penicillin. So they used garlic, which they called Russian penicillin, as a natural antibiotic. It worked. The healer is the guardian of the community's most precious asset, its people. In a world without hospitals, these skills don't just treat illness. They prevent it, manage it, and give people a fighting chance. August 29, 2005. Hurricane Katrina slams into the Gulf Coast. Within hours, New Orleans is underwater. The city's hospitals are evacuating. Ambulances can't get through. 911 doesn't work. And people are injured. Everywhere. The formal medical system had collapsed. In its place, something remarkable happened. Informal street clinics emerged, often just a person with medical training and a first aid kit, set up under a highway overpass or in a parking lot. Many were run by nurses, some by paramedics, others by community members who just had advanced first aid training. They became the front line of public health. They cleaned wounds, treated dehydration, stabilized injuries, saved lives. In any collapse scenario, trauma is common. People are working harder, using tools they're not familiar with, working in dangerous conditions. There are fires, accidents, falls, cuts. And here's the terrifying part. In a post-collapse world, a minor injury can become a death sentence. A small cut gets infected. Without antibiotics, that infection spreads. Sepsis sets in. In the modern world, you'd go to a hospital and get a shot of penicillin. Problem solved. In a collapsed world, you die. This is why wound care is perhaps the single most important medical skill. Knowing how to properly clean a wound, how to remove debris, how to recognize the signs of infection early, how to dress it properly to promote healing and prevent contamination. It sounds simple. It's not. It requires knowledge, practice, and the right supplies. Beyond wound care, there's a whole spectrum of emergency medicine. How to control severe bleeding using pressure points and tourniquets. How to treat shock, a condition that kills more people in emergencies than the injuries themselves. How to recognize and treat dehydration, which can be lethal in just days. How to set a simple fracture using improvised splints. How to treat burns, which are incredibly common when people are cooking over open flames. These aren't doctor-level skills. These are things a motivated person can learn. There are courses, books, training. But most people never bother because they assume the medical system will always be there. History says otherwise. In the Soviet Union's collapse, medical care essentially evaporated. Hospitals ran out of basic supplies. Doctors worked without pay. People died from treatable conditions. The survivors were often those who had basic medical knowledge themselves, or who knew someone who did. There's a popular myth in survival culture, the myth of the lone wolf, the rugged individualist who goes off into the wilderness and survives on their own. It's a fantasy, and it's a dangerous one. The real survivors, in every historical collapse, are the people who form communities, who organize, who cooperate, who build trust and share resources. This is the domain of the connector, the person who understands that survival is a group activity and has the skills to build and maintain a functioning society when the official one collapses. Let's address the elephant in the room. When systems collapse, violence often increases. Not always, not everywhere, but often enough that it's a real concern. In a crisis, there's a predictable progression. At first, most people are in shock. Then, as resources become scarce, desperation sets in. And desperate people do desperate things. The skill here is not about being a lone vigilante or stockpiling weapons, though security is certainly part of the equation. It's about organizing people. During the Siege of Sarajevo, neighborhoods self-organized into defensive units. These weren't military, they were civilians, but they established watch rotations. They fortified buildings. They created early warning systems. And most importantly, they set up systems to de-escalate conflict before it turned violent. Because here's the thing about violence. Once it starts, everybody loses. A firefight leaves people injured and dead on both sides. Resources are destroyed. Trust evaporates. The real skill is preventing violence through strength and organization. This means establishing a neighborhood watch, planning patrol routes, setting up communication systems, creating clear guidelines for who's part of the community and who's not. It means having difficult conversations about how to handle threats, how to share security duties, how to make decisions as a group. And yes, it means being prepared to defend your community if necessary, but the goal is always de-escalation first. After Hurricane Katrina, some neighborhoods in New Orleans remained relatively safe while others descended into chaos. The difference? Organization. In places where neighbors knew each other, where someone took the initiative to organize security, where there were clear communication channels, those places stayed safe. The neighborhoods that fell apart were the ones where everyone was isolated, where nobody knew their neighbors. where there was no social cohesion. Community security isn't about violence. It's about creating a social structure strong enough that violence becomes unnecessary. When money dies, a new economy is born, the barter system. But here's what most people don't understand. Barter is inefficient and complicated without organization. Imagine, you have extra vegetables and you need firewood. Your neighbor has firewood, but they need medical supplies. Someone else has medical supplies, but they need vegetables. How do you coordinate this? How do you establish fair exchange rates? How do you prevent disputes? This is where the connector becomes invaluable. In 2001, Argentina's economy collapsed. The peso lost 75% of its value almost overnight. Banks froze accounts. People couldn't access their money. The formal economy simply stopped functioning. Within months, thousands of barter clubs, called truques, sprang up across the country. At their peak, over 2.5 million Argentinians were participating. These weren't random meetups. They were organized markets with their own internal currencies, with coordinators who understood the relative value of goods and skills, with mediation systems for disputes. They were a grassroots economic miracle. And they were run by connectors who understood that people don't just need stuff, they need a system to exchange stuff. The skill here is multi-layered, understanding value. What's actually useful versus what's just culturally valuable. A luxury watch is worthless in a collapse. A manual can opener is gold, facilitating trade. Being the person who knows what everyone has and what everyone needs. Being the matchmaker of the barter economy. Acting as a fair mediator. When disputes arise, and they will, being trusted enough that both parties will accept your judgment. This isn't just about economics. It's about building the social infrastructure that allows a community to function. In the modern world, all human knowledge is available instantly. You have a question, you Google it. You need to learn a skill, you watch a YouTube video. In a collapsed world, that disappears. Suddenly, knowledge itself becomes a scarce resource, and the person who has preserved that knowledge, who has actual physical books, who knows how to teach others, becomes the community's hard drive. This is about more than just hoarding information. It's about being able to communicate it effectively. A technical manual on plumbing is useless if you can't explain it to someone who's never held a wrench. The teacher, the person who can break down complex skills into understandable steps, who has the patience to work with beginners, who can pass on practical knowledge, is ensuring that critical skills aren't lost. After the fall of Rome, most technical knowledge disappeared. The ability to build aqueducts, to create concrete, to engineer roads, all of it was lost for centuries. Why? Because it wasn't written down in a way that could be preserved and taught. The monasteries that survived the Dark Ages did so partly because they preserved books. They became the memory of civilization. In a collapse, your personal library of practical books becomes incredibly valuable. Books on gardening, mechanics, medicine, construction, blacksmithing, food preservation. But more than that, the willingness to share that knowledge, to teach it to others, creates resilience for the entire community. Because your stockpile might last you a month. Your skills might last you a year. But a community of skilled, knowledgeable people can last generations. The connector understands the ultimate truth of any collapse. We survive together, or we don't survive at all. Let's step back and look at what we've covered. The producer, who creates food, purifies water, generates energy. The fixer, who maintains and repairs the physical infrastructure of life. The healer, who protects the health of the community. The connector, who builds the social infrastructure that allows people to work together. Notice something? None of these roles require a college degree. None of them require certification from a government agency. None of them require money to start learning. What they require is time, practice, dedication. They require you to make a fundamental shift in how you think about value. Right now, we measure wealth in dollars, in net worth, in the balance of our investment accounts. And yes, in a functioning system, those things matter. But they're abstractions. They're promises that only work if everyone agrees to keep believing in them. The skills we've discussed, they're real. They produce real results. They solve real problems. They create real value that exists independent of any system. Here's the question I want you to sit with. 10 years from now, would you rather have an extra $100,000 in your retirement account? Or the knowledge of how to feed your family, fix your car, treat an injury, and organize your community? Now you might say, why not both? Fair enough. But here's the thing. You're spending your most valuable resource, your time, building one or the other. Every hour you spend learning a practical skill is an hour you're not spending climbing the corporate ladder or maximizing your income. I'm not saying quit your job and become a homesteader. I'm saying, what's your insurance policy? The beautiful thing about these skills, you don't have to master all of them. You can't. Nobody can. Even the most prepared person in history couldn't be an expert farmer, mechanic, medic, and carpenter all at once. But you can become competent in a few areas, and you can build a network of people who have different skills than you do. Start small. Pick one skill from the producer category. Maybe it's growing a small container garden on your balcony. Maybe it's learning to can vegetables. Maybe it's installing a small solar panel to charge your phone. Pick one skill from the fixer category. Take a basic car maintenance course. Learn to sew. Build something with your hands. Pick one skill from the healer category. Take a wilderness first aid course. Build a comprehensive first aid kit and learn how to use everything in it. Pick one skill from the connector category. Get to know your neighbors. Organize a community garden. Start a skill-sharing group. You don't have to become an expert overnight. You just have to start. Because every skill you learn makes you more capable, more resilient, more valuable, not just in a collapse, but right now. The person who can fix their own car saves thousands of dollars. The person who can grow some of their own food eats healthier. The person who knows their neighbors has a richer, more connected life. These skills don't just prepare you for the worst. They improve your life in the present. We live in a time of unprecedented abundance and unprecedented fragility. We have more wealth, more technology, more comfort than any civilization in history. We're also more specialized, more dependent, more vulnerable than we've ever been. The world we've built is a marvel, but it's not permanent. History teaches us that over and over again. All empires fall. All currencies eventually die. All systems break. What's left in the aftermath is not the abstract, but the real. Not what you own, but what you can do. This journey through the skills of survival isn't a call to fear. It's a call to empowerment. It's an invitation to ask yourself, who would I be if the system disappeared tomorrow? Would you be helpless? Dependent? Waiting for someone to save you? Or would you be the one people turn to? The one who can solve problems? The one who makes things work? Your true inheritance isn't the money in your bank account. It's the knowledge in your head, the strength in your hands, and the trust you've built with your community. These are the assets that are truly priceless, and they're the only ones that will matter when the old money is gone. Start building them today.